Welcome to the Marketer's Mind Podcast, a raw and unfiltered show for the serious marketer eager for a glimpse into the hardcore strategies and tactics used by A players in the world of direct response. Here's your host, Todd Brown.
All right, we're going to continue our conversation about marketing math. Yes, arithmetic. I know everybody else is talking about whiz-bang tactics and cool new marketing strategies and all these weird, wild plugins, and we're talking about math. But here's the real deal. Here's the truth. The truth is that this is where the fortune is made, by understanding the arithmetic, the math behind direct response marketing, behind your campaigns. And I promise you, by the time we're done with this episode, you will look at customer acquisition and the mathematics, the financials of acquiring customers wildly differently from what you or how you do right now. I want to start by talking about cheap traffic and how and why cheap traffic and being on the hunt for cheap traffic, inexpensive sources of traffic, will kill your business, right? Hunting for, relying on cheap traffic is what keeps entrepreneurs on this roller coaster of up and down income, right? Because the reality is this, that cheap traffic is temporary. It's temporary because any good source, any quality source of traffic is eventually going to get discovered by other marketers, by other entrepreneurs. And when it does get discovered by other entrepreneurs and marketers, they will begin to pour into that cheap source of traffic. And what'll happen is demand will go up, and as demand goes up, price will increase. And so if you're relying on cheap traffic, it's only a matter of time before that cheap traffic gets discovered, and then it's no longer cheap, and then you can no longer afford to use it, and you now have to hunt for another cheap source of traffic. See, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when that cheap source of traffic is no longer cheap. See, the reality is this, as this might go against what it is that you intuitively believe or intuitively think, or this might even go against what it is that you've been taught. But here's the truth. Your goal shouldn't be to look for cheap sources of traffic. Your goal should be to increase the value of a customer. And I don't mean the lifetime value. I don't mean the value of a customer over their life of their patronage with you and your business. That's not what I'm talking about in this context. What I'm talking about in this context is your aim, your goal, your focus should be to increase the average transaction size of a new customer during their first transaction. This is sometimes referred to as average cart value. Average cart value is nothing more than what's the average amount of money that the typical, in this context, new customer spends with you during their first transaction. Some customers might spend, for example, $100 with you during their first transaction. Some might spend $1,000 with you. Some might spend $10 with you. Whatever it is in your business, but there's an average, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about what is the average, right? So if you looked at over the last year, over the last 6 months, if you looked at how much money did you generate from first-time buyers, and how many first-time buyers did you have? Take the number, take the total sales that you generated from first-time buyers, divide it by the total number of first-time buyers you generated, and that'll give you an average amount of money, an average cart value, if you will, for your new customers. Now, the thing to understand is this, where the stability will come in your business, where the kind of the consistency will come, where you will be able to not just compete with other marketers and entrepreneurs in your marketplace, but dominate and win, is when you focus on increasing that average cart value. Instead of trying to, and this is important, and so get this, understand this, right? A lot of marketers, a lot of new marketers, new entrepreneurs make the mistake of having a low average transaction amount, a low average cart value. And what they do is they go out and they try to find traffic that is cheap enough to allow them to acquire customers at their low average cart value, right? Meaning like if, their average cart value is only, let's say $10, if that's what the average new customer spends, what they do is they go on the hunt to try to find cheap traffic, cheap enough to allow them to pay less than $10 to acquire a single new customer. But like I've said, that makes their business incredibly vulnerable. It makes your business incredibly vulnerable when you are reliant on cheap traffic, because cheap traffic, like I said, is temporary. It will disappear. If it's any good, if it's worth anything, it will get discovered and it will increase in price as demand goes up. And then you will be forced to move on to a different source of traffic and hopefully find another source of traffic that will allow you at least temporarily to acquire customers, in this example, below $10. No, that's not how the pros operate. And that's not how you want to operate. To have consistency, to have stability, so that not only do you never lose a traffic source, but you're able to grow your sources of traffic. The game is not how can you get the cheapest traffic possible. The game is how can you afford to spend the most? How can you afford to spend more to get traffic? How can you afford to spend more to acquire a single new customer? And so the way you do that, the easiest way, the safest way, is to focus on average cart value. Now, I've talked in the past on prior episodes about the 3 different levels of acquisition aggression. The 3 different levels of acquisition aggression, meaning how aggressive are you when it comes to what it is that you're willing to spend to acquire a single new customer. Very quickly, in case you haven't heard that episode or you haven't heard my explanation before. So at level 1, you've got the mom and pop acquisition aggression. That's the typical entrepreneur who is looking to generate a profit from every transaction. They don't understand or see or view the front end and the back end. They just view every transaction has the same purpose in their business with their perspective, and that is to generate a profit. So if their average cart value is $50, they're only willing to spend maybe $25 to get a new customer. Then we've got level 2. Level 2 is what we call break even. That's where if you invest $1,000 your aim into traffic, your aim is to simply make $1,000 back in sales. At level 2, you're building your list for free. You are acquiring new customers for free. You're building your list of prospects for free. Your bank account is no less today than it was, 2 days ago. And then there's level 3, which is the most advanced or the most aggressive level. And this is where you typically see the biggest, fastest growing direct response based companies operating. Level 3 is where you go negative, where you are investing in the acquisition of new customers at a level that is beyond average cart value, meaning that if the average cart value, the average new customer is worth $50 to you during their very first transaction, we don't only look at that number when we're operating at the 3rd most aggressive level of acquisition aggression. We look at lifetime value. We look at the whole value of the asset, the customer, and we base what it is that we're willing to invest based on what it is that they're going to spend today, average cart value, and what it is that they're going to spend in the future with us. For the majority of my clients, especially ones that are just starting out in their business or they're very early in their business, the safest place for you to operate is at level 2, is at break even. And what that means for you is whatever the average cart value is, whatever the average amount of money is that the typical new customer spends with you during their first transaction, that amount is what you should be willing to invest to get a new customer. Now, the goal for you here, right, is to constantly increase that number. You want to increase your average cart value. Why? So that you can afford to spend even more to get a new new customer. All else being equal, he or she who can afford to spend the most and does spend the most to acquire a new customer is going to win the game. So your goal, don't let your competitors focus on trying to get their traffic costs way down, and let your competitors focus on trying to find cheap sources of traffic. You focus on increasing your average cart value. By focusing on increasing your average cart value, you'll be able to add new sources of traffic to your repertoire, to your traffic toolbox, and you'll be able to afford traffic sources that your competitors can't, because they have a low average cart value, let's just say, and instead of focusing on increasing average cart value, they just go out and try to hunt and find traffic cheap enough that allow them to acquire customers at that low level of average cart value, when instead what I want you to do is focus on increasing your average cart value so that you ultimately focus on increasing the amount of money that you are able to invest to acquire a single new customer. Now listen to me. And this is so important, right? This whole game of direct response marketing, of really marketing in general, of growing your business, right, really comes down to those, three things, which I mentioned earlier. I think I mentioned them earlier in this podcast, right? It comes down to psychology, understanding your prospect, understanding their wants, desires, fears, emotions, understanding that you're not dealing with a blank canvas, but that they're bringing certain frames, context, references, preconceived notions to the table, understanding who it is that you're talking to, the psychology, right? And then we've got communication, understanding how to communicate your big idea, your big marketing idea, the unique mechanism of your product, how your product ultimately delivers on the primary promise, the primary transformation, being able to communicate a rock solid, airtight, emotional and logical argument, being able to communicate a sin offer, superior, irresistible, no-brainer offer, all things that, right, like we teach our students and clients in the E5 Camp masterclass. And then we've got arithmetic. We've got psychology, communication, and arithmetic, math. And I want you to really understand that this is a business that is driven so much by the math. And when you are able to increase the amount of money that you can afford to invest to get a customer, your business will continue to grow quicker and quicker. The more you can afford to invest to get a customer, the bigger and faster your business can grow. I know, like, on the surface, it may seem to some of you to be to go against everything that you kind of like you thought coming into business. I know for me, when I first came into business many moons ago, I thought the idea was to spend the least amount on marketing, right? Like the goal is to spend the least amount. If you can keep, like looking at marketing as an expense, and if you can keep your expenses down, that means you have a higher margin. And if you have a higher margin, that means there's more profit. But that's a mistake, because the mistake is looking at marketing as an expense. Marketing isn't an expense. Marketing is an investment. And when it's done right, when you have a properly structured front-end customer acquisition marketing campaign, like, for example, what I teach in the E5 Camp Masterclass, right? When you've got that in place, it's not an expense, it's an investment. It allows you to invest $1 and then over time make back $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, and so on. That's not an expense. It's not an expense like your electric bill or your telephone bill or your internet bill, whatever it may be, right? This is an investment. And so seeing it as an investment, like any good investment, and again, I need to be clear that, right, not all marketing, not all advertising is a good investment. If it's structured the wrong way, if it doesn't convert, if it doesn't produce the sale, then it's not good marketing, or it's not a good investment. But when you have a campaign that converts on the front end and allows you to acquire new customers, that is a sound investment. It's something that brings you back ultimately over time more money than you put into it. And just like any other good investment, your goal is to max out how much money you are putting in there so that you can reap maximum rewards. And that's really what the name of the game is. You not only want to invest as much as you can into your marketing, into good marketing that's working, but you want to be able able to spend as much as possible to acquire a single new customer, right? That's like your goal. And the safest way to do it is, if you're operating at that second level of acquisition aggression, is to increase your average cart value. If your average cart value today is $50 and you increase it, which we'll talk about in just a second, to $60, well, now you can afford to spend $60 to acquire a single new customer. If you get it from 60 to 75, now you can afford to spend 75 to get a new customer. While your competitors are looking for cheap sources of traffic that are here today and gone tomorrow, you won't have to worry about that, because even over time, as certain traffic sources become more popular and prices increase, as they always do when demand goes up, you won't have a problem paying for it. You won't have a problem getting it. And here's the other thing to continue on this rant, and then I'm going to share with you a couple different ways that you can increase your average cart value. And that is this, right? That there's no such thing as a traffic problem, right? There really isn't. When I hear marketers, when I hear entrepreneurs say things like, right, I just can't afford to get traffic, or traffic is too expensive on Facebook, or traffic is too expensive on Google AdWords, or traffic is too expensive on YouTube, understand that there's no such thing as too expensive traffic. It might be too expensive for you based on your campaign, but that doesn't mean that it's too expensive for everybody. That doesn't mean, right? That's too expensive is all relative. It's all relative because it's based on what it is that a visitor to your campaign, to your marketing campaign, is worth, right? If every visitor on average that comes to your marketing campaign is worth $7, right? Because of your sales conversion rate, because of your average cart value, blah, 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 right? Because of all that. If the average visitor to your campaign is worth $7, well, a cost per click of $4 isn't expensive. To you, that's cheap, because every time you spend $4 to get a visitor, you're getting on average $7 back. But to the marketer, to the entrepreneur who's got a poorly converting campaign and is only generating $2 on average per visitor, well, then $4 is expensive. They can't afford to use that traffic. But it's not because there is this, because the value, the intrinsic value of the traffic is just overpriced. There's no such thing, right? It's priced. Traffic is priced based on demand, based on what the market will pay, based on what other entrepreneurs and marketers will happily pay for a visitor. What it comes down to is your ability to extract out the equal amount or more value than what it's going to cost you to get a visitor. So in the case of the $7, in the case of $4, if you were paying $4, if the cost was $4 per visitor, $4 per click, for example, the reality is this, that it's your job as a marketer to be able to increase the value of a customer, to increase average cart value enough to pay that $4 average per click. So you have to realize that it's not a matter of the traffic being too expensive. There's no such thing. It's a matter of having a campaign that it doesn't allow you to extract what the market has determined the value is, right? If other people are willing to pay $4 per click, that means that they are able to extract out at least $4 or more per visitor. You need to be able to do the same thing. And so with that being said, let's talk a little bit about how to increase average cart value. Now, remember, going back to the 3 levels of acquisition aggression, right? That the pros, the biggest and quickest growing direct response companies are willing to go negative. They're willing to invest what it is that they're willing to invest a dollar amount based on what it is that a customer is worth today, as well as what a customer is worth in the future. For you, depending on where you're at, I would recommend the same thing that I recommend to a majority of my my students and clients, and that is you start at break even. That means the most amount that you are willing to spend, your maximum cost per acquisition, is equal to your average cart value. The maximum amount of money that you're willing to spend to acquire a customer is equal to the average amount of money that a new customer spends with you. That's average cart value. So let me give you 4 simple, quick ways that you can work on increasing your average cart value. The first is very simple: increase your price. This is something that most entrepreneurs and marketers, they've never tested. They don't understand, or they haven't yet discovered the actual threshold that their market will bear for their product. A lot of times pricing is based on assumption. It's based on what other entrepreneurs or other companies in the market have done. And you would be surprised at how elastic the price range can be for your product, no matter where everybody else is priced in your market. And so don't be afraid to price test. Don't be afraid to increase your price. Test at 10%, 20%, 25% higher price point. You may be pleasantly surprised at what it is that your market will bear, and how very easily you can increase your average cart value just by increasing your price. And remember, you increase your price. If you increase your price and you are able to increase your average cart value, in some cases you can increase your price and not see any decrease in conversions. Sometimes you can increase your price and see an increase in sales conversions, which would grow your average cart value exponentially. That just becomes this incredible cycle of growth where now you're making more money. You're pumping more money into customer acquisition. That more money that you're pumping in allows you to acquire even more customers, and it just becomes this incredible cycle of growth. So increase your price. The second way to increase average cart value is to add a bump offer to your order form, right? A bump offer is a little offer on your order form. It's usually a few lines or a couple lines of text, and it's more of an impulse buy. It's something that your prospect can check a box next to the bump offer. They can add it to their order. This is before they check out. Right, it's right on the order form. One of the keys here that you want to roll with when testing bump offers, I recommend that you test something that is a fraction of the price of what it is that you are charging for the main product. So if you're charging $50 for the main product, add a bump offer on your order form for $19. Let's say it should be more of an impulse buy. Understand that when you make it more of an impulse buy, it's not uncommon to see a 30, 40, even 50% take rate on that bump offer. That means potentially 1 out of every 2 new customers will take advantage of that. Now understand that if you're charging $20, call it, for a bump offer on a $50 product, and you get 50% of the people to take advantage of that, that means that you just added $10 to your average cart value. $10 to your average cart value. If you were selling a product for $50, you just increased the amount of money that you are collecting by 20%. That is huge when it comes to the average cart value, and when it comes to collecting more money to be able to invest more money to get new customers. And so add a bump offer. I would tell you that what you're looking for minimum on your bump offer is a 20% take rate. So you want at least 2 out of 10 people, 2 out of 10 customers to take advantage of that. If you're below that, you really need to get to work on testing, optimizing the bump offer. The next thing that you can add in is what we call an add-on offer sequence. An add-on offer sequence is, more common. Most people would call it an upsell sequence, but in this case, we're not necessarily upselling. We are adding on options for the new customer, options for them to get more value, for them to get easier results, faster results, for them to get a product or service that they would need next in their journey. And that offer is made after they complete the order form. So after they complete the order form, they enter their credit card information, they press submit. Now they come to an add-on offer sequence. And And there's a lot of different ways that you can structure this offer sequence, going from low price to higher price rather than high price to low price. And we'll probably talk about that and cover that in a future episode. The last tip that I would give you is you want to use what I call a second chance offer sequence. And a second chance offer sequence simply is when folks skip one or more offers in the add-on offer sequence. If they skip your first add-on offer, your first upsell offer, you would go back to those people within 48 hours, of checking out, of ordering the product. And you would give them an opportunity to take advantage of that upsell or add-on offer again. You'd give them a second chance to take advantage of one of the extra offers that they skipped. And so increase your price, add a bump offer to the order form, add an add-on offer sequence, post order form, and then add in a second chance offer sequence for the folks that pass on one or more of your add-on offers. That's a way that, or 4 ways that you can increase average cart value. And so there you go. Hopefully this shifted your mindset a bit. Hopefully you realize how critically important understanding the math of direct response, especially acquisition and the different levels of acquisition aggression, how important and critical that is to your success. Like, you know what? While so many marketers are getting caught up in these little shiny objects, these weird tactics, these new buzz phrase strategies, these new things on the block, what you've got to realize is that the pros understand the arithmetic behind this business. They understand that it's foundational, and I want you to understand that it's foundational, and I want you to focus on the critical elements of this business. And one of those critical elements is the arithmetic. And hopefully this episode really opened your eyes a bit. If you enjoyed this episode, man, I would be so appreciative if you took a minute to just go over and leave a review on iTunes, leave a rating. It'll really help us continue to get the word out about the Marketer's Mind podcast. And if you want to learn more about the E5 Camp method, which is my method for engineering and testing and scaling a customer acquisition campaign, you can go over to e5workshop.com. That's the letter E, the numeral 5workshop.com. Thanks for hanging out with me on this episode. Thanks for listening to me. I'm so passionate about this, and I hope that you really get it and understand it, and that's why it's so important to me. But that's it for today, and I'll talk to you in our next episode.